It's the View from the West podcast. So, of course, we're talking about the Western Big Six. It's time to preview the big schools on the western side of the state. Mitch Stormer still on vacation, but no problem. We called in the expertise from around the area. We got a full boat show here. Let's get into a Western Big Six preview pod. Here we go. Oh, I see the note card stock. We'll get into that. Talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a View from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome into View from the West podcast, the podcast covering Illinois high school football on the western side of the state of Illinois. So, of course, as we said in the intro, it's the Western Big Six. Mitch Stormer still on vacation, but it's okay. We got plenty of experts on the pod today. The panel is rich with expertise, none more so than the man with the note cards, the dial-up internet, Brian Stocking. How are you, sir?
Doing well, old school. Saw Riverdale win in the Tug Fest. They beat Pleasant Valley in the Tug Fest. I mean, what else can you beat that?
Man, preseason Brian Stocking shot out of a cannon. How many note cards you got here for us tonight?
At least 8.
Oh, at least 8. Okay.
Wow. Plus,
I thought there'd be more. One for every school.
Post-it notes. I've got notebooks. I've got everything.
I love it. I love it. Brian Stocking, welcome back to View from the West. The fans have been missing you. They've been clamoring.
Well, I'm glad to be back.
Of course, we brought in your counterparts from WQAD. We have sports
counterparts, colleagues,
esteemed colleagues,
brothers,
brothers. Well, that's a scary household to think about. Brothers of Brian Stocking, Matt Randazzo, sports director at WQAD, Kory Kuffler from WQAD. Dazzle, I'll start with you. You're on the clock here. You're working tonight, so I got to get you on set. So, but hey, you're here. You're ready to roll.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting time. The practices started today on the Illinois side of the river and the Iowa side, but nobody cares about that on this podcast. But yeah, so we're super excited to get rolling, and I'm honestly here to educate myself because I look at the panel and I say I can learn from these people. So I'll add what I can when I can, and I'm just disappointed Mitch isn't here. I didn't know that was part of the thing, or if I wouldn't have been here.
Well, you were mad at me because I was going to make you record this pod before practices even started.
Yeah,
so I at least waited for that.
Yeah, I waited for one day. And of course, me being an idiot, I went to Assumption. You know, I didn't even think to myself, hey, I should go over to like UT or something like that. So, but I think we know a lot of, that's the one thing I'll say about the Western Big Six this year is, yeah, there's like an expected, team that's going to be really good that we'll talk a lot about, but also like, last year, we kind of knew that Geneseo had a lot coming back, and we knew that United Township had a lot coming back, and we knew a lot of names. And I think the one big thing about this year is that a lot of teams we just don't know a lot about, coaching-wise as well. 2 new coaches in the Western Big Six. So I think that's kind of the neat thing is that it's almost a mystery, the Western Big Six, on how good it could be or what's going to happen this year.
We're here to unravel all the mystery.
Love it.
Kory Kuffler, a day off, but you're still here. You're a dedicated individual. I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, I played a little golf today.
Man.
What better to do on your day off? You know, football practices are going on and I'm on the golf course. So, no, I'm excited about this season. Football season is one of my favorite seasons, and the Western Big Six this year, outside of one team, I think is kind of up for grabs for the other teams of who's going to get second place and which team is going to show that they've got a young group that's ready to step up and take that next step and see how the new coaches can do in the Big Six. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun year, I think.
Well, if there's one team that stands out, Matt Schuckman, can you tell us who that is? Matt Schuckman from Muddy River Sports here to join us. You know a team that's in your area that might have an impact in the Big Six this year?
Might be okay this year. We'll see. They got a few guys back, and they might be a team to consider as your preseason pick to win the league. But I'm just curious how Kuffler got a day off in August. Football practice started, soccer, volleyball, everything went on, and Kuffler's got a day off. How?
What's funny is what the little secret is if you see over my shoulder, there's Jenna Miner. She's actually the one that really does the work around here. She went to 2 practices today. I only went to 1. Cuff had the day off. She did twice the work as Kory and I combined today. So that's the secret with the WQAD sports department.
Well, thank you for everyone for joining us. Mitch is out enjoying himself somewhere in the great state of California, or Florida, I believe. Florida. He's on vacation, but we'll get him back in the loop. But today we got our panel of experts here. We're talking Western Big Six. Of course, the episode is powered by Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They provide all the same sporting goods services as the nationwide companies, but with a faster turnaround, and their uniform pricing is a fraction of what you're probably used to. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. Check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com. You can also shoot Cal Breedlove an email, calbreedlove@gmail.com for more information. We love our partnership with Breedloves, and as a lot of you may have already seen, this season we're taking it to the next level. View from the West merch is now available. You can head over to our X account, or also attached in this description of this podcast, you can find the link to the online store set up by Breedloves. We got a bunch of different t-shirts available, some great football shirts, support local football, a t-shirt available. We also have the run, touchdown, repeat. It's Mitch's favorite offense. We got that shirt available. For those who prefer the up-tempo Western Big 12, we also have the pass, play action, touchdown, repeat. So that might be a little more in Quincy's wheelhouse, I feel like sometimes, but they can do both pretty well. So what I'm really excited about, we have rivalry t-shirts available this season. We're selling t-shirts for the Morrison-Fulton Wooden Shoe Rivalry, Rockridge, Mercer County, Kewanee, Princeton, and of course, Rock Island versus Moline. We remain unbiased, so we're offering 2 different options. You can go with the Go Rocky, Beat Moline, or the Go Moline, Beat Rocky. It's simple. It's straight to the point. So head out, pick up that gear today. Like I said, the link is available in this episode description. Store will remain open through the preseason closing on August 28th. Orders will be shipped out for right near the beginning of the football season. So really exciting stuff. We're excited to get those t-shirts out there. Just, drum up some interest in high school football, but also in the rivalries, especially for this episode, Rock Island versus Moline. Let's get right into things here. And we're actually going to start with Rock Island Alleman. Head coach Jeff Schmalbach reached out to me and said, hey, I'd really love to get, some names out there and really love to talk about our program. So they got 8 returning on offense, 8 returning on defense. What's really, the thing that is good for this Alleman program is they continue to build some numbers. So numbers are up. They start this season with 45 players. That goes up from 30 a year ago. So in this, transition time where they're trying to rebuild the program, that's a great sign to start with. They were able to schedule 2 levels of games this season, which is very important for the progression of, 20 plus freshmen. So I believe they'll play some freshman games as well as some JV games. They also said that early in the season, in week 0, they will play a scrimmage game against Riverdale. Dazzo, I know you're close to Alleman. What have you seen or heard about the program?
Yeah, it is exciting because the numbers are up. I know that he was extremely eager to not sit it out this year. And I'm not saying they're sitting it out, but have a varsity schedule and do those kind of things. And he was somebody that up until the very end wanted to do it. And you probably talked to him today, he still wants to do it. But with that being said, Alleman, you only get one chance, I think, to restart this and do it correctly. And I think that's what they're doing. Obviously, the numbers show my son's in the freshman class. He's not playing football, but that's a good freshman class of 20 plus kids. I know the group coming in 8th grade is even bigger than that. So those are the two that they're really, putting a lot of effort into, and those classes and the sophomore class ahead of it is important for the rebuild. They're doing a good job of getting some games in, playing a lot of stuff, and the energy around that place is great. So Coach Schmolbach's doing a great job. I know he wants to keep playing, but to have a JV schedule and to have a freshman schedule, super important to the development of that program. And like I said, you only get to do it right, or you only get to reboot this, I think, once and make sure it's done correctly. And so there's no reason to rush it, especially when you're getting into the Western Big Six. And I don't mean this in a disparaging way towards Brian Stacking's alma mater, but Riverdale sat out a year and they came back, and the Three Rivers is really, really good, but it's not the size of what the Western Big Six is. Alleman's up in enrollment a little bit this year. I do know that. I know that there's following classes that are important as well, but doing this correctly, and there's not anybody that has any more passion with them when it comes to redoing this than Coach Schmolbach. So some good pieces around it, some talented kids that are in there and looking to grow it and get better and better as it goes. So I think it's cool they're playing Riverdale. I know they have to travel a lot this year to get the JV schedule in and get out and about, but to have a game like that in varsity and do those kind of things is really exciting. So it's getting there. As an Alleman guy, as an Alleman alum, I'm patiently watching and waiting, and I think I got good feelings that it's going in the right direction, and it's going to continue under Coach Schmolbach. So patience, I think, is the key at Alleman, and sometimes it's hard for them to remember. I think he'd like to rock and roll quicker than they could. So, but when they do hit the ground, hopefully they can hit the ground running.
I've been impressed with, in talking to him through the offseason, what I've heard about kind of the way he's going about kind of building that excitement back up and just trying to, kind of building the foundation again, right? And just kind of getting their feet back under him. He says that this year is about building consistency and really being ready to not just get into varsity football next year, but being ready to compete. And like you said, that's no easy task when you're, historically, Alleman's been on the smaller side of the conference, obviously, as the private school in the conference, but even more so now, after having sit out a year, it's going to be tough to jump in, but I'm excited to see, just kind of where they can continue to grow this year. I believe he said last year they were 4-2-1 in a JV schedule. So they had some success, right? They won more than they lost. So you'll take that. Looking at some of the names, that they have on the roster this year, Kelly Honert, a sophomore at quarterback, Adam Van Meegen, a junior wide receiver, Will Otten-Toms, a junior wide receiver, Kyle Bowden, a junior running back, a couple linemen here, Robbie Wolf, Grant Messias. On the defensive side of the ball, Matthew King. You have Van Meegen again as an outside linebacker, Bowden again inside linebacker, nose tackle Luke Hoffman, and Otten-Toms again at cornerback. So several names there, for Alleman fans to watch for and be excited about. I'm glad that they're getting a chance to play a varsity level game, even if it's a scrimmage against Riverdale. I think that's just one more small step, right, to ensure that you get that kind of competition early on. So
yeah, no, and I just, to echo what you just said, is that's the main thing, is to do it correctly, to do it right. And Coach Schmolbach does have a ton of energy when he comes to this kind of stuff, but you got to make sure they do it the correct way and you get back on track. I mean, you look at some of the numbers, and you talked about Alleman historically being a smaller school. Absolutely. And then I'm dating myself because it feels like it wasn't that long ago, but 1997, I think it was 100 or 460 kids when I graduated.
yeah,
And it's been, up to probably 5 years ago, it was around 400 kids, 420, something like that. It's under 300 kids right now. And it's important to point out that Coach Schmolbach and his staff and Coach Fritz and what he did before that have nothing to do with what happened to Alleman football and not being able to field a team. And that's an important thing to know. And it's not the coaching staff or the kids or anything like that. I think a lot of people look at Alleman and say what happened, and it kind of, you look at those kids or you look at those coaches or you look at the previous coaches. It was and I won't get into it all, but it was a whole messed up on a year and a half at Alleman that is righted itself. And, people are gone and there's great people in place and all those kind of things. So without getting into all of that, like, you really want to make sure you realize those Fritz teams that went 0-9 and 1-8, Those kids were doing a lot of great things, maybe not winning games, but representing a school and getting out in the field and all that kind of stuff. So, along with that, we should wish Charles Jugasaw the best. An Alleman kid that was ticketed to start at left tackle for Notre Dame. Started the bowl game last year, tore a right pectoral muscle. He's out for the year. So our best to him as well. I know he listens to the pod, Greg. I mean, and why wouldn't you?
It wasn't that long ago that Alleman was a playoff team. They made the playoffs right up until COVID. They were making the playoffs on a regular basis. So once they get righted, they should be in contention for a playoff bid, because
which is a big
get in with 4 wins.
Which is a big reason why other conferences might not want Alleman. Because once they do fix it, it's going to be pretty good. People look at it and say, Alleman, if they get out of the Western Big Six, they should go to the track or something like that. Like, I've talked to coaches off the record that know that, once Alleman gets it figured out, and if they can rebuild, it's no guarantee that they do. But if they do rebuild it, and Jeff Schmalbach's doing a great job, then that would probably be a bad thing for a smaller conference. So I think that's kind of the tough part that Alleman's in, with finding a place to be and all that kind of stuff.
So good luck to Coach Schmalbach and the Pioneers this season as they get their freshman JV schedule, see if they can, build some of that consistency that Coach talked about and kind of continue to build up. And hopefully we see them back on the varsity scene, next season. That would be great. I think it's a better Western Big Six when it's, Alleman's involved and we're fully in the mix. So, all right, moving along to Galesburg. Interesting offseason. So they find themselves with an interim head coach here in Sean Hickey. From what I've heard and from what I've read, he's been around the program, been around the school for a while. So I think, him stepping in, there's some familiarity there with coaches and with the players, which is probably a good thing, because this was, kind of a last minute switch. So Sean Hickey takes over a Galesburg Silver Streaks team that was 2-7 a year ago. They returned 5 on offense, 6 on defense. But a few names we recognize: Jamar Range, a running back we called out a couple times last year, Asher Whitcomb at center, Larry Randolph at an offensive tackle, and you also have Caden Ashby on the wide receiver position on offense. Kenny Ward is a linebacker, 65 tackles a year ago. Range, we already referenced, as a linebacker with 56 tackles a year ago. Demetrius Watson and Larry Randolph also back again. They each had a handful of tackles, 25 and 17 respectively. So this Galesburg team, Sean Hickey likes coming into this year, strong senior leadership. So we'll talk a little bit more down the way. There's some teams that have some question marks, but, maybe this Galesburg team has some, seniors that can step up, some familiarity, a little bit of experience. Cuff, what do you think needs to happen in Galesburg? What does Coach Hickey need to, focus on this offseason or this preseason to get ready for the Western Big Six?
First of all, he's tasked with stepping into a situation where, obviously the old coach going out, we don't need to get into what happened, but stepping into a situation where they're coming off a 2-win season. The 2 teams they beat last year, they do play this year, so that's a good thing for them. I think the biggest thing for them is just to instill some confidence. And if he can get them playing good football, they don't have to be a 500 team. They don't have to win 5 games or make the playoffs. If he gets them 3 wins, if he gets them 1 win, it doesn't matter. If they're moving in the right direction, I think he's a guy that can potentially, if he wants it, take the job and then build for next year as well. So, this is, you say a transition year, but I think it's a year that they don't want to think of it that way. They want to think of it as, let's get back to a few years ago when they did make the playoffs. They have more strength probably on the defensive side of the ball than they do the offensive side of the ball. So Sean's tasked with a tough challenge here, but I think if he and his coaches can all get on the same page, get the kids to buy in, that's the biggest thing. Get the kids to buy in, make them play for each other. I think this is a team that could upset a few teams. I don't think they're a playoff team this year. That's probably a few years away, but I think they're a team that can definitely shake things up in the Western Big Six if you take them too lightly.
What I think is kind of interesting is, as I said, strong senior leadership is something that Coach Hickey pointed out. He said they really set the tone in the summer workouts, demonstrating the accountability for the younger players. So as a program that was in this transition, losing a head coach, that's great to have senior leadership that kind of takes some of that coaching role for you a little bit. I think that's a huge sign. And he just said overall, this team has developed a strong sense, of what he called the brotherhood this summer. And he hopes that will continue into the season. I think those are two good things, to point out about what could be for this Galesburg program.
Absolutely, because if that doesn't happen over the summer, going into fall practice, you don't know where your team's at, which direction they're going to go. They could have given up before they even started anything. So to hear that they're a team that's not going to give up, they want coach to do well. They want to do well. They want to show what Galesburg football is all about. So I think that's a really good sign for them that they didn't give up. They're like, hey, let's buy in, let's do it. Just because when a captain leaves the ship, everybody else can leave the ship too. And they decided, no, we're going to stick with it.
Yep. Stock, you're itching to say something. Jump in.
Galesburg can improve, but they got to improve on 3 areas from last year: defense, their start, and their home record. Last year, they gave up 43 points in a game, 56 points in a game. They scored 46 in one game and lost that game by 17. So they've got to get better on defense. They can't get in track meets. The other thing that I noticed is they were
unless they still had Josh Eicher, then they should get into track meets.
Well, even so, they were 1-5.
He was the fastest in the state.
Last year, they start off the season 1-5. They cannot have. If you want to, you're talking about maybe playing meaningful games in October. You're not going to have meaningful games in October when you're 1-5. And they were also 1-3 at home last year. They improve on the start of the season. They improve on their home record. They might have a meaningful game or two in October, even if they don't make the playoffs. Say they go 3-6, they're 3-4 going into week 8. That's meaningful football games.
Yeah. Coach Hickey did point out that they really want to improve offensive consistency, their offensive efficiency, and just being consistent with personnel and having, kids stepping up, making that kind of a habit game in and game out. And like every team this year, they have to avoid injuries. He likes the solid core of athletes they got, but that injuries could quickly have a negative impact, so that's a few things to watch for there. So that's kind of the look at Galesburg. Should we jump into the Quad Cities just down the road from WQAD? The Moline Maroons, Mike Morrissey, and the Maroons 4-5 a year ago. They returned 7 on offense, 4 on defense. And Cuff, I got to start with you. You're the Moline Maroon here. So what do you know? What do you see in Moline this season?
Well, I've run past their practices a couple times in the morning. I should say not actual practices. It was their camp.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't illegal practice.
They're illegal underground. Breaking
Did we just break some news here?
Chuck's
already writing it down. He's already got the article posted.
Morrissey's so mad at you right now. My gosh.
Here's the thing with Moline. They return a lot of guys from last year. They were young. A lot of guys hadn't had a lot of playing experience. They were young. Going 4-5 was probably a shock to a lot of people that have been following Moline because they've won the Western Big Six. Either them or Sterling had won the Western Big Six every year for the past, 5 or 6 years, whatever it was. So going 4-5, missing out on the playoffs, that's not typical for Moline. They did have some problems with a few players last year that they ended up saying, hey, come back this year. Those players are back. So I think those players have a little bit of a renewed interest in the team. They're ready to prove that, hey, what happened last year wasn't a good thing. When you got the names they have coming back, I think Moline's a team you got to look at to potentially, if they can get the wins when they need them, give Quincy a run for their money. But I still think Quincy's the team to beat in the Big Six. But Moline, the one thing with them, their first game of the season is with Rockwood Summit out of St. Louis or the Missouri area. Their coach, Eric Stewart, he played for Moline back in 1998. He was one of the Plowboys, so he was on the line, and they've been trying to get this game set up for a number of years. They finally were able to get it set up, so they're driving up on that first Friday night, doing the game, and I think driving back. I don't know how far Rockwood is, but they're not a cupcake team. They're not coming up here to be like, oh, hey, it's great, we're returning back to Moline just to play a game. They went 10-1 last year, undefeated in their district. They averaged about 43 points a game. So this is a really good team that they're going to play in week 1. So Moline will definitely get tested in week 1 to see right where they're at.
Well, let's go through some of the returning starters. Cuff, you mentioned a lot of names coming back. Eli Taylor at quarterback, Adrian Cooper at running back, Corbin Schnell running back as well. Eli Warren, Mark Carey as running backs. You also have Colin Fredrickson at running back / wide receiver. Alex Rubin at wide receiver as well. Bennett Gorgel on the line. You have Gennaro Cepeda on the line as well. Eric Rosas on the defensive side of the ball. Adrian Cooper, Mason Golden at linebackers. Latorian Hill and Cepeda also on the defensive line. Jack Sibley, Drew Phelps in the defensive back position. So plenty of names there. Stock, Dazzo, you got something?
Yeah, I just when I'm going to jump in front of you, Stack. When it comes to like listening to Coach Morrissey, a handsome man, I may add, that talk about being young last year, which they were. It reminds me of the COVID year where they didn't have a great spring, and all you heard from Coach Morrissey, which they were, is that we were really young. We were really young, and it just has me getting those vibes of. After we're really young, they went and ran off 3 straight Western Big Six championships or whatever it was. So I think he knows what he's talking about. And I think they got some guys that are really talented that were young last year, some experience. So I really look at like Moline to take a step forward, and I don't know if they're Western Big Six championship good by any stretch, but I think they're going to make a market improvement from last year. And he's a handsome man. Go ahead. Speaking of handsome men, Stockpile.
The last time Moline went 2-4 in the Western Big Six was, as Dazzo said, 2020. Then they won 14 Western Big Six games in a row.
Boom.
So I mean, Moline, when they do, you don't want to get them riled up. For Moline, though, last year they went winless on the road in the conference. They lost their last 3 games on the road. Corbin Schnell, as you said, he was 5th in the conference in rushing yards. But here's the thing for Moline. They have to get off to a good start. They play Rockwood Summit. Then they play Lyle Bennett. They've never beaten Lyle Bennett. Then they open at Geneseo, home to Quincy, at Rocky. That is a 5-game gauntlet. And I think then, and then they play United Township. So that is a 6-game gauntlet for any team. So they have to start off quickly and well. And if there is any team that could give Quincy a game and beat Quincy, the Moline game on September 20th, that game is at Browning Field. Quincy struggles on road games like that because last year they almost lost to Sterling. They only beat them by 2 up at Sterling. If there is a game that will beat Quincy, it could be Moline.
All right. Well, that tees it up. I was going to bring that up. Shuck, is this one of the games that maybe you or Quincy fans have circled as that's a road game right, in the middle, early part of the season? Yep. Go ahead.
I think there's 2 critical games on Quincy's schedule, Moline being one, Sterling being the other. Because Quincy is 1-4 against Sterling since it joined the league. So that's, and for either one of those schools, that's a long road trip on a Friday night. So that always is a critical game. Saw Moline here last year. The thing I liked about Moline is their young talent. Well, that young talent is a year older now, still talented. That experience is going to pay off for them. I don't foresee Moline being a 4-5 team this year. I think they're going to be in the mix to win the Big Six. They're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be the Moline we kind of expect year in and year out. Is that good enough to knock Quincy off the perch? We'll see. Quincy's awfully good. Quincy's questions, and we'll get more into Quincy, I know, here in a bit. But Quincy's frontline guys are really good. Depth will be a question. So, and I know we'll get more into that, but I really think Moline, based on the fact that Sterling lost a lot, Geneseo lost a lot, Moline is now that number 2 team right now in the league as we head into the season.
There was a year back when who was the big running back for Quincy? Just lost his name.
Brock.
Brock.
Yeah, when they came up his senior year, junior year. They came up to Moline and played, and Moline intentionally did not mow the grass for a week and a half. So it was longer. So they can't do that, though, with Little because he throws the ball. So they can't do anything about that. So.
Reading Coach Morrissey's notes here, he says overall they want to improve on fundamentals across the board. They struggled to move the ball consistently on offense. They couldn't stop teams defensively. They want to be more physical offensively. better tacklers on defense. He says defensively, a newfound aggressiveness. So you got to love that this summer has been he says the summer has been a great snapshot for how fast and physical our guys can play defense at times. So that's interesting to see if they have a defense that is ready to step up, because they'll be challenged, certainly against Quincy.
I love the coach speak you get from these guys. We want to be good at fundamentals.
Yeah.
Well, no crap. Everybody wants to be good at fundamentals. But I do like the way he talked about his defense, a newfound aggression. Like that's good stuff. Like that's stuff you sit there and go, okay, they want to be more aggressive this year. They want to get a little nastier on defense because they weren't as nasty last year.
And they lost games because of it. The game against Geneseo. Geneseo had never beat them in the Western Big Six. They beat them last year. UT hadn't beat them since 2020 year, and they beat them last year. So there's games on Molin's schedule. They're like, hey, we want to get some back.
Yeah.
Morrissey said they also want to stay healthy this year. I'm waiting for the one coach to tell me they want to get hurt more often.
I hope we have to overcome some adversity when it comes to injuries. Like nobody says that.
So, one last note about Moline, and we've kind of talked a little bit about it, is that he says a lot of his guys are motivated to get Moline football back to that standard, right? A lot of these kids, in junior high were watching Moline dominate in the Western Big Six. So there's motivation there instantly. They've seen it. They grew up with it. They want to get back to that level. So we'll see. We'll get to our picks later, but I think Moline will be a team that may be tossed around, as far as somewhere near the top of the Western Big Six. Interesting to see where they fall. Another team that I think is really interesting moving into this fall season, the Geneseo Maple Leafs. Matt Furlong takes over, first-year head coach. You ready for this stat? I looked it up myself. Stocking, you're gonna love this one. Only the 6th head coach for Geneseo since 1962.
Wow. That's good stuff.
I got a wow out of Brian Stocking. So
that's good stuff.
You might as well wrap up the episode. Wrap up the episode. I think you just end right now. This could be the last View from the West podcast ever, because you can't end better than that.
Well, I was going to ask, you were talking merch earlier. Where's the stockpile shirts?
Oh, we do need a stockpile.
Maybe the fact that Stock just got upstaged by Armstrong, no stockpile shirts now.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the Moline UT shirts, because they used to play for a trophy and they lost the trophy. So
wasn't it a few years ago you boldly predicted, was that the one that
trophy?
UT was going to win week 3 against Moline? It didn't go well.
Something like mollywopping them or something.
Yeah. Well, I made my crystal ball that night was a little foggy. So
that's understandable.
Schuck, a few years ago, there was a local public school that made Brian Stocking fatheads. They held him up like big sign cutouts.
We asked on was it a podcast?
It was
podcast?
It was our podcast.
Yeah, we asked him if they could, if anybody would do that, and sure enough, the next week it was glorious.
All right, we've derailed back to Geneseo. They were 6-3 a year ago, lost to IC Catholic in the first round of the playoffs. What really stood out to me, and I wasn't even sure if it was for real. Coach Furlong says they have 0 returning starters. He said 0. So
that could be.
They were a senior laden team.
Yes.
So I don't know if anybody filled in occasionally, but the 0 was the number for returning starters, which really kind of caught me off guard. Some of the names they got here: Jackson McAvoy at quarterback, Kai Weinzerl at running back, Aaron Betcher as an offensive lineman, Quinn Van Hefty as a running back, Colton Schmal-Burton at running back, Malachi Jackson, also a running back on the defensive side of the ball, Cole Freeman, Kai Weinzerl, and Brennan Lambin. So a few names to watch there for Geneseo. Team strength, Coach Furlong says it's a group of upperclassmen and underclassmen both that are ready to prove themselves. They're eager to improve, and they're ready to jump in with this new offensive and defensive system. That's what I think is interesting is, you had Coach Johnson and, Geneseo's system set up for years and years. I don't know exactly what Coach Furlong's playbook looks like, but inevitably it's going to be a little different, right? So there's some new things being taught. There are new things being installed, the way he kind of wants to see offense and defense work. It'll be fascinating to see how quickly they can jump in and, kind of how things flow with a new team.
So I met I met Coach Furlong up in a Yorkville Moline game a few years ago. It was a playoff game. He was there when he was coaching at Downers Grove North. And just in talking to him, he's a great defensive mind. I know Coach Morrissey had wanted to get him on his staff for a long time. So I'm not going to be surprised if Geneseo's defense is going to be really, really good this year. But I did talk to Joe Nichols, the athletic director, maybe just a couple weeks ago. He said the guys in the weight room, their commitment has been great with Coach Furlong. The biggest thing with the new coach is, installing things and trying to get that new language and how you communicate to the guys and how do they learn it and things like that. But one thing Coach Nichols said was, you're going to see a lot of old-time Geneseo things. Yeah. To me, that means they're going to run the ball down your throat. It doesn't matter if it's 3rd and 8, we're running the ball. Occasionally, they're going to pass it. But I think even at Downers Grove North, they were a run-first team, and they were pretty dominant in what they did up there. So I think he's bringing a lot of those principles down here to Geneseo.
Well, most recently, he was at Cary Grove. And
Cary Grove.
Yeah, Cary Grove. They had a phenomenal defense, which he led. But offensively, they were very much a ground attack and really methodical at it. I mean, really great. There's a state championship game against East St. Louis last year, 2 years ago. I can't remember what one it was, but they went on this clock chewing drive literally to end the game. I mean, in the 4th quarter, they do some things on offense that are phenomenal. Obviously, they had a great defense as well. They're a state championship team. I'm interested to see, like you said, kind of what he does on both sides of the football. Dazzo, what do you think about Geneseo this year?
It's funny because you mentioned just what you said. He led a defense that beat East St. Louis in the state championship game.
Yeah.
That's enough of a resume. I mean, that pops off the charts. And so I've talked to Coach Morrissey about him. I know they're friends. And I'm just eager to see him back in the Quad Cities, kind of getting us started at a great tradition-rich program like Geneseo's. And it's kind of similar. I went over to Assumption today on the other side of the river, and Wade King's gone after 22 years. And there's a new head coach there, and it had me thinking about Geneseo because, and there's not too many head coaches, and I like a lot of them that I have more respect for than Larry Johnson and the human being that he was and all that kind of is. He's still with us. He still is. So, but it's just going to be different to see how and I think Furlong will do a good job of blending that in, because you don't want to run away from that tradition by any stretch of the imagination, but you have to be your own coach and put your own stamp on things and everything like that. This is the most mysterious Geneseo. It's the exact opposite of last year. Last year, we knew who they had. We knew what they expected. A 6-win team that got a bad draw in the first round, or they could have won a playoff game or two. I thought it was a really good football team. I mean, they beat Moline and they had signature wins throughout the season. So, it's a different time in Geneseo, and it's more an intriguing kind of thing on what's this going to look like. How is this going to look? I think, as media guys and my media members, we're excited to see what they look like after 3 weeks, what they look like. We know what we're going to get from a lot of teams. This one we don't know, because we don't know what it looks like with a brand new head coach that we haven't had in our area before.
The Green Machine, though, needs a little restoration work. Last year, they lost their final 3 Western Big 6 games. They lost to Sterling, only scored 3 points at home. Lost to Quincy, lost to Rock Island, only scored 12 points. Their last 2 final home games in the conference, because they played Mendota out of conference, they only scored 15 points in those 2 losses. That's not Geneseo football. Geneseo would have, if they had won one of those 2 or both of those, they probably would have had a home game. And this surprised me. The last time Geneseo hosted a playoff game was 2016. And they've lost 5 in a row in the playoffs. I think the last time they won was 2015. That's stunning to me.
Always so negative.
Come on.
No, I'm not being negative. I'm just saying that they've got to do some restoration work. They could very easily do that, but they do have to do some restoration work this year.
You are committed to that pun.
They're one of 3 teams in the Western Big 6 that make trips to Wisconsin this year.
Oh,
but you got to remember, Stock, those games you're talking about, all those players are gone. So it's new players, new year.
That.
So
new players, new year, new coaches, new systems, new everything.
But the history doesn't change.
Schuck, what do you got?
Well, tradition doesn't graduate. So there's going to be expectations for Geneseo. It's Geneseo football. People are going to want to see this team succeed. What's it going to look like? How's it going to play out on the field? No one knows right now. And if the new coach had stepped in with, say, 6-7 starters returning, then you kind of go, okay, we know what's there. None of us know. You know, as he put on your questionnaire, no returning starters.
Yeah.
You know,
do you
so
think
That's wild.
And they were so senior laden last year. I know when they came down to Quincy, you looked up and down the roster and just starter, senior, starter, senior, starter, senior. So you kind of knew some of this was coming. There was going to be turnover, but man, no returning starters. That's zero. Now there are some guys that saw action.
Yeah.
Maybe started here or there. Maybe they weren't full-time starters, but he's starting fresh.
Well, and I was just going to say, is there something to be said about starting with a clean slate, a new head coach, building a new system? These kids that, were eager for reps, and they, I'm sure they knew the playbook a year ago, but I don't know, like, you have these kids willing to do whatever they can do to, get those minutes, get those starts. So
it's their opportunity to make the program theirs.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along with the coaching staff. It's like the coaching staff gets to take this program and mold it into the way they see it, but the players do too. It's their chance to add their chapter to the Geneseo legacy.
Yep.
And some of the assistant coaches are back. They didn't all just leave when Coach Johnson left. So there's still that familiarity. And the only name that I remember that's on your list there is Weinzierl, but it was Jaron Weinzierl, his brother, not Kai. So
Yep. So obviously, Coach Furlong talked about these guys got to gain that experience at the varsity level, and they got to learn fast. And that's a theme we're going to hear down the road too. A couple other coaches in the Western Big Six said something very similar, that they got to get old quickly, as far as, that experience, that maturity. So that'll be one of those teams. He talks about needing great mental discipline, winning the line of scrimmage, ability to sustain drives offensively. It's a lot of things you're going to hear from a lot of coaches, but just things that he thinks are important for this Geneseo team. Yep. This episode of View from the West podcast is brought to you by Simulation Sports. In addition to golf simulators and batting cages, Simulation Sports provides golf club repair, custom fittings for driver shafts, and even private lessons for golf, baseball, and softball. Whether you're looking for a fun group activity or want to fine-tune your skills and equipment, Simulation Sports has something for everyone. Visit their facility at 400 South Main Street in Monmouth, Illinois, or go to thesimulationsports.com to start playing today.
Shouldn't financial advice focus on you? I can help you plan for your financial future, from protection to saving to retirement. I'm Nate Neighbor, your Modern Woodman representative. Call me at 309-233-2656 or find me on the Modern Woodman website.
Get to know your local Modern Woodman representative to plan for your financial future and learn about valuable member benefits. Modern Woodman of America. Touching lives, securing futures. Securities offered through MWA Financial Services, Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of Modern Woodman of America.
View from the West podcast is also sponsored by the Cupcake Cartel. Gourmet cupcakes that are made to order. Over 40 flavors, including wedding cake, lemon blueberry, strawberry milkshake, snickerdoodle, and Oreo. Perfect for weddings, birthdays, showers, fundraisers, or any event. You can find the Cupcake Cartel on Facebook. We thank them for their support. Well, let's go from a bit of the unknown to a team that I think we know a whole lot about in the Quincy Blue Devils. Head coach Rick Little last year led the Blue Devils to an 11-1 season, playoff wins against West Chicago, Wheaton North. They lost to Mount Carmel. They returned 6 on offense, 7 on defense. We'll go through the list. It's the names we've talked about a lot. We'll start with Braden Little. He was our View from the West Player of the Year last year. 3,440 yards passing, 48 total touchdowns, 45 of those through the air, 3 of them on the ground. He was a 7A All-State quarterback. Jarius Rice, over 1,600 yards rushing, 450 yards receiving. Tykel Hammers, Caden Johansson, both back at wide receiver as weapons for Braden Little. Rico Clay on the defensive side of the ball, 5 interceptions a year ago. Todd Smith, Ryan Cashman, Ben Shelp at linebacker. They're back. They're ready to make an impact here. So Schuck, this is your team. This is, you know them best. So I'll let you start.
Well, here's the deal. They are top heavy. That senior class that has built, some of these guys saw action as freshmen, including Braden Little, and so they built for this. This was the one when Rick Little instituted the QYFL, the Quincy Youth Football League. These are the kids, all these kids came up through that league. So like this is the group that everybody kind of was hanging their hat on to. When they get here, how far can they go? And we saw some of that last year. I mean, first undefeated regular season since 1935. First home playoff win in school history. First time in the state quarterfinals. So what do you do for an encore? And I think that's the big question right now. They've put up, video game numbers in some circumstances. So what do you do for an encore? And I think that starts by, winning the Big Six once again. That would be the first step for an encore, and then going deeper into the playoffs. The question marks are there. You've got your front end guys, but do you have depth? What if Jarius Rice gets hurt? What if Tykel Hammers or Caden Johansson get hurt? Do you have guys behind them? Like there was a little more depth last year at those skill position players. Up front, they returned one offensive lineman that started last year. Now, I think they could be better offensively up front because some of those guys, I think, they played because they were seniors, including, one of them, Cole Waggy, who was a really good, tackle. Well, he's already been moved to tight end at college just because of his bulk. He just doesn't have the size to play along the offensive line in college. So you look at that. Todd Smith is a man-child, 6'6", 285. Your Western Big Six Conference heavyweight wrestling champion. He's your anchor at left tackle. Jackson Moore, who's a big into weightlifting. His dad is a bodybuilder, a weightlifter. So he's kind of got that brute strength. He'll be your starter at center more than likely. And they've got pieces to put in there. And defensively, yeah, they lost pieces, but they also returned several key guys. And then they've got guys that played a lot last year. Cameron Fax Hill will be a starter on the defensive front. Demarius DeVerger was an all-conference defensive lineman last year. He returns. You mentioned Rico Clay. Rico Clay is going to see some time offensively too. When you're 6'4" and can go get the ball like that and have the natural instincts to just say, okay, throw it up there, I'll go get it. Because in a way, that's how he plays cornerback. It's, he read and react and goes and gets the ball. And that's why he ended up with 5 interceptions last year. He's a kid who's already committed to Illinois State. Braden Little just committed to Quincy University. Arguably the best commitment Quincy University football program's ever had. There's some chatter that that's how significant that is for that program. Quincy's got all the pieces to be the Big Six champion again.
Yeah.
Like Schuck said, Quincy's got a lot of things that they can strive for. They've won 12 games, regular season games in a row. They've won the last 9 Western Big Six games. They've won the last 6 Western Big Six road games. So they can improve on each one of those metrics. Last year, the fewest points that Quincy scored, Schuck said that they had video game numbers. He was right. 34 points was the fewest points they scored in any game. They scored 35 or more 8 times. They had 6 games where they scored 41 or more. Jarius Rice, 3 rushing touchdowns against Moline. Braden Little, 7 passing touchdowns against Galesburg. In the Western Big Six alone, Braden Little completed 75.8% of his passes. That is unbelievable. And the thing for Quincy is they have a week 4 game against Moline. It's at Moline. It's always a struggle. But the game that might be sneaking in the weeds that people aren't paying attention to, Sterling at Quincy. Quincy has never beaten Sterling at Flynn Stadium.
Interesting. Right. We'll get to the Golden Warriors in a few minutes. But we obviously talked about. Oh, go ahead, Schuck.
A quick note on Braden Little. You mentioned some of those stats there, stock. He is roughly 500 passing yards away from cracking the top 20 career in IHSA history.
Wow.
If he has comparable numbers to last year, he will finish in the top 5 in state history in yardage, completions, and touchdown passes.
Now that's stockpile gold.
He's an
That's the kind of stuff that we look for. Shuck, would you be available on Friday nights to come up and take over for this one guy that doesn't give us this? No, I'm just kidding.
So here's the funny thing. We're doing our own Friday night football show starting this year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we're gonna go we're gonna go 10 to midnight. And have coaches from the area call in, and some might. Rick Little's already said he would be willing to come down to our office and sit in with me. And so Muddy Night Lights.
Oh, I love
it. I love it.
I love that. That's fantastic. Hey, I'm excited because Rick Little, I hadn't really met him until last year's Western Big Six banquet. And it was funny because the easy joke was he rolled into town when it's got the best team in school history. I'm expecting to see Rick again this year. I'm excited. I'm going to sit and break bread with him. We'll chat and have a good time. I found out one thing, and Chuck, this obviously, but there's that man. He blew me away with what a genuine good dude he was.
Yeah,
you can talk to people and you can have some conversations, but we had fantastic. I mean, you could tell he genuinely cared about the other person in the conversation and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, both of us have kids and all those kind of things. So
if you get the chance to chat with him at that, he's a huge baseball fan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm excited to. Hopefully, they put him next to me again, and I like to sit next to champions, and that's what he was last year. So maybe it was because he sat next to me. We'll see.
Give a quick plug. When is the Western Big Six coaches banquet?
Oh yeah, it is. It's August 21st. So a week from this Wednesday at the Rock Island Botanical Center. Come on out and enjoy it. I mean, it's one of those things that they've gone by the wayside, and this one hasn't. It's great.
Right.
But we love to see people out there. It's a great time. We tell jokes. It's stuff that I know this world of social media, there's so much information out there, but this is genuinely just a good time to have fun. You get to see the coach's personality. You get to see the coaches interact with each other because the majority of them like each other. I think all of them like each other. So that's kind of fun to see as well. So, and they get to make fun of Mike Morrissey for being the best looking coach in the Quad Cities. So that's just, it makes my life awesome.
Who's the funniest coach of the group?
Oh, who's the funniest?
That's interesting. Let me think. I'm going through them. God bless you, Fritz, but he's not. You know what? Morrissey's okay. He's not as funny as he is handsome. I'll tell you that right now. Welch does a good job. It's the Western Big Six basketball banquet. Cuff's thinking in his head.
Well, that's because of Sean Taylor.
It is. Yeah, Taylor's hilarious, but Douglas does, and he hasn't been there recently, but Douglas is funny. Yeah. And Ryan Weber a few years ago did impressions of everybody, and it was outstanding. So Mark Polite's too nice. Yeah. No pun intended.
Larry Johnson last year was sneaky funny though.
He was hilarious last year.
Yeah.
I think he kind of knew. He was like, I'm done.
He may have.
So my job, I'm out. So, and then there's new ones. So you don't know. Hopefully, but and they all take really nice to it, and they all kind of get it towards the end, and they realize that it's all about having fun and poking jokes at, especially me. But if they come with the ear jokes, it's just laziness. Research, do something. There's a lot to make fun of me about, but ears, that's just low hanging fruit. So.
I will say the Western Big Six, we're lucky in this area to cover a great group of coaches. Yeah. Larry Johnson included a year ago, and from all indications, Cuff, like you said, Coach Furlong is great stepping in there. But just across the board, this conference, we have a lot of great coaches in the area. But as a collection of Western Big Six coaches, it is a really good group of guys. And one of the things about starting this podcast was kind of getting to know Quincy a little better, including our friend Shuck here, getting to know Shuck. But Rick Little, I had not interacted with him, being able to, he's really good at getting forms back to us. We've never met in person, but he still takes the time to email stats when we ask, or even, on his own, will email stats. He'll get us the information we need. So always been really appreciative of that. Just a great group of coaches. And I agree. I missed the banquet last year, but I hope I can go this year because it's a ton of fun.
No,
Well,
it'll
just
be-
remember,
it'll be
you're
fun.
all invited to be on Shuck on a Truck if it ever works out.
Oh, we
man.
got to get that.
We
to
should do
happen.
this on a truck next year. Hey,
That would be fun.
Greg, I got a boogie.
I know you got to
because
do
I
a
gotta do the
show.
show, but I want to do one thing because we were talking about good coaches. Two coaches in the Western Big Six made their presence felt at my dad's golf outing, my dad's memorial golf outing this year. So I got to give a shout out to Coach Welch and his entire, like there was 2 teams from United Township
Nice.
of coaches and stuff. So, I mean, if that doesn't give you a good vibe going into the season, man, if they do, watch them go 9-0 and I can just pound that drum. And also Coach Schmalbach was there as well, which was awesome. And some Alleman coaches as well, which is easier because I'm an Alleman guy, but have to give them some love before I go. Good luck with Stockpile, guys. I hope he behaves himself.
It's hard to corral. We'll do our best.
All right, Shuck, are you going to the banquet next week?
I wasn't planning on it, but I might have to try to figure that out.
I'll buy you, if you come up, I'll buy you dinner. It's on me.
We'll just eat on the tailgate of the truck.
There you go.
Love
See you,
it.
fellas.
All right.
Yeah, Shuck, we missed our chance last year. We had a chance to hook up. That was
I
my bad.
know. That was my fault because I didn't realize you were there at the time, and
Yeah,
we'll
we'll get it figured out.
we will. We need to.
All right. A few more teams left in the Western Big Six here. Rock Island head coach Fritz Deodone back again this year. They were 3-6 a year ago. They returned 7 on offense, 8 on defense. He says returners or significant contributors. So a lot of names here that we recognize. This is one of the teams that, you know, it's both sides, right? A few teams like Geneseo that didn't have a lot coming back. Molina's come back, players coming back. Rock Island does have a lot coming back. Javion Clark-Pugh at quarterback, Quincy Black at running back and defensive back, Keontae Farah at tight end, Evan Ellis at wide receiver, Devontae Connor at wide receiver, Deshaun McKay and Elijah Venegas. You also have a pair of offensive linemen, Kevin Mayaris and Jace Nissen, and Jonas Cortez, a kicker, returning as an all-conference player. So a lot of offensive firepower there. Cuff, what do you think about this Rock Island squad this year? We'll get into their defense in a second here. They got a lot of players returning there as well.
I'm excited to see Javion Clark-Pugh again at quarterback. I know there were some people last year that was like, I don't know if he's ready. He did a pretty good job last year. I believe he was only a sophomore last year, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he did a really good job. So a year under the system, get some new guys to throw to. You're a little bit older, a little bit more mature. I'm excited to see what he can do. They do lose Gartar, who is one of their best running backs from last year. So Rocky never has a problem of filling that running back position. They always have that next man in or somebody in that can step up. Curious to see how that works for them. You mentioned the kicker. Last year, I believe he was a sophomore, and he kicked in their red and gold game. He kicked a 45-yard field goal, and it was good, probably from 50. I mean, he's got a foot on him, so he's definitely going to be a weapon for them this season. Another thing to think about for Rocky, this is their 125th year as a football program. They're going to be celebrating that. So that's kind of cool. They're doing a celebration, I believe. I don't know when you're running this podcast, but it's going to be on the 14th is when they're going to do that celebration, August 14th. And it's the 95th year for the stadium. So Rocky Stadium. They've made some upgrades to that stadium. It's, I think, still one of the best in the area. I mean, probably holds 10,000, and I know they want to fill that thing up sometime. That'd be the coolest thing to see that thing filled up. So we'll see what Fritz can do in, I believe, year 2 over at Rocky. He's got some good offensive weapons. So I don't see them having any hiccups like they did last year with a few teams along the way.
So let's look at the defensive side of the ball here real quick. VJ Gerard, safety, returning all-conference player. Avion Thomas, a defensive back. Isaiah Duarte as a linebacker, returning all-conference player. Santana Smith at linebacker. Josh Ferrance at linebacker. Rowan Stockwell, Kylan Mitchell, and Julian Mayaris at defensive line. So a lot of names back on that side of the ball as well. Overall, they're looking to improve their offensive starts. It took them several games before they hit their stride last year, and they need to be able to maintain drives, take advantage of defensive turnovers. Last year, they won 3 out of their last 4 games. So as a first-year head coach, Coach Deodone talked a lot about, these players now in this second year have more familiarity with the system, with the schemes that are in place. We talked about that with Coach Furlong and Geneseo, and any first year head coach in a new place. There's going to be some learning curve. Players are learning new systems. They're learning new wording, new offensive plays, new defensive systems. So I'm interested to see how Rock Island can start this season with some more familiarity. Schuck, what do you think?
Well, I think, and I think Kuffler will agree with me here. Rock Island always has athletes.
Yes,
so like finding the skill position players really isn't the challenge. It's getting guys with experience and they have a little bit of that this year. They're not going to have to replace every single position. If they get the guys up front to play with some tenacity and some meanness and some nastiness and put those athletes around them, then you got something. And the really good Rock Island teams we've seen over the last 25 years, well, you knew they had athletes. You knew you had guys, they were going to get the ball in their hands and make plays. It all came down to how physical they were up front and defensively. And I think the experience from last year carries over to this year. Little more familiarity, work ethic in the offseason, a better offseason, and suddenly, maybe here in a bit when we're talking about who contends in the Big Six, maybe Rock Island's one of those teams we got to make sure we look at.
They started 0-5 last year, and 4 times they only had 1 touchdown. So I don't think that's going to happen again this year. I mean, their worst loss was that Sterling Newman game, and it was after that point. The kids didn't give up because obviously, like you said, Greg, they won 3 of their last 4 to get them the wins that they needed and get a little momentum. So I don't see them starting 0-5 this year at all. I can see them going 4-1, 3-2,
yep,
maybe even 5-0. Depending, they got Quincy in that first 5, so it's just maybe not 5-0, but we'll see.
Rocky will be won their last 2 games at home last year. The last 2 games they won at home, they had 2 pick sixes to beat United Township last year. That was their first win. They play Manuka and then they play Dunlap. Dunlap plays Galesburg and then Rocky. Dunlap has, according to the Peoria Journal-Star, one of the top running backs in the Peoria area. His name is Jackson Oldham. Jackson Oldham. That is a kid that Rocky's going to have to stop. If they can stop him, maybe they got a chance to beat Dunlap. They, like Cuff said, they went 0-5 last year. That was their worst start since 1977. Their first 3 games, they had 21 points. So they have to improve their starts. If they can improve their start, maybe win a couple of games, especially on the when they're at home, those first couple of games, maybe be 1-1 or 2-0 instead of 0-2. Maybe that gives them some momentum, but they've got to get better starts and they've got to be more consistent on offense. Last year, 4 times they had 7 points or less. That's not going to get it done in the Western Big Six, even if it's not the Western Big 12 like it used to be.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to see what Coach Diodone can do in his second year here. I think when he was hired at Rock Island, obviously there were some questions because he came from an Alleman program where the record wasn't great, but we talked about it on the podcast. I think that Alleman was in a rough situation and he did what he could, and I think he got them in the best position they could be in at the time. I think now moving into this Rock Island situation, I think you're seeing the system is put in place. What can they do this year? I think that there's a chance here for this Rock Island team to find some success, under Coach Fritz. And I think it will kind of prove or kind of validate, I guess, what we've thought all along, that, Coach Diodone is a good program leader and a good football coach. And I think this group could prove it.
Yeah,
Clark Pugh last year Clark Pugh last year in the conference, 730 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. He does that again, or even improves on that. Rocky's got a chance.
So a lot of people did question, why are you hiring him from Alleman when they went 1-17? Well, that's not fair to Fritz. That wasn't his fault. That was the situation that Alleman was in. But then when he started 0-5, you had all those people, some longtime Rocky fans going, see, we should have never hired him. We were 0-5 to start the season. But look at that back half. Like you said, they got better. They got their wins when they needed to. I think they're going to carry that momentum. He's such a good person, Fritz is. He cares about his players. He wants them to do well, not just on the football field, but in life in general. And that's any coach. That's what they want. So he's the right guy for the right situation at Rock Island. I think they're going to have a really good year this year.
Yep. And he will quiet all those critics if they win a few games early.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely. The View from the West Player of the Week is brought to you by Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. You can check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com, or shoot Cal Breedlove an email at calbreedlove@gmail.com.
This is Dan Pearson of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Our FCA team of staff, board, and volunteers is pleased to support View from the West with Greg and Mitch. Our Northwest Illinois FCA team is 3 teams in 1, serving coaches and athletes in the Three Rivers, Northern Illinois, and Greater Peoria areas, all with schools covered by View from the West. For more information, email me at danpearson@fca.org. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
The Quad City's first and only fantasy football show, For Fantasy's Sake, has you all covered when it comes to all of your fantasy football needs. The guys come to you live every Sunday morning during the football season from 10 to 11:30. They've got the best analysis, rankings, DFS, and gambling advice between the Rock and Mississippi Rivers. So tune into For Fantasy's Sake every Sunday during the football season from 10 to 11:30 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube.
Hey, this is Brett Bielma, the head coach of the Fighting Illini from Prophetstown, Illinois. You're listening to the View from the West podcast.
Well, let's move into United Township and the Panthers. Head coach Nick Welch, 4-5 a year ago. This year they returned 4 on offense, 1 on defense. Cuff, this was a senior-heavy team last year that had some expectations. They didn't make the playoffs last year, which I think was one of the goals for Welch and the Panthers. They have some names coming back, but they do have some spots to fill this season.
Yeah, and how about we start at quarterback with Matthew Kelly? I mean, what a great year he had last year, either running the ball, throwing the ball, great dual threat quarterback. Kory Randall, one of his biggest targets that he threw to. I remember in that game where they beat Moline, they scored 4 touchdowns in like a quarter. It was crazy how many touchdowns, like back and forth. And they have some athletes that they lost. They were a team last year. I remember looking at their schedule. I was like, they needed to win that LaSalle Peru game.
Yeah.
If they had won that game, they were 5-4. They're in the playoffs. When they lost it, it was week 1. I was like, it's going to be tough, I think. I don't think they're in that scenario this year because you just don't know. But if they can get off to that good start, get that LaSalle Peru game, see what happens. Some of these guys that waited in the wings last year, they're going to get a chance to play. They're going to get a chance to prove that they can do it. This is year, 5, I think, for Coach Welch. So it's no longer learning the system. It's let's get it done now.
Yeah, he does say they got some skill player. They got some skill players returning that he has high hopes for. You know, some offensive skill players he referenced. Isaiah Navarrete, a running back, ran for 416 yards a year ago, 8 touchdowns. Cohen Parsons at wide receiver. Christian Peterson at quarterback stepped in a few times when Kelly was injured. So he was able to make some plays, scored 4 passing touchdowns. You also have Eli Oppenheimer on the line, Tristan Wallerab on the line as well, Josiah Massey at wide receiver, Angel Gomez also on that offensive side of the ball. He's excited with, the weapons they have, that they can be some dynamic athletes and that they have a strong understanding of the system. They've been here. They've been waiting to make their mark. This is their year. He likes their size up front. The offensive line, where they have 4 of their starters are juniors, 2 are returning starters from a year ago. So he likes the offensive line. Defensively on the other side, he says they're going to be extremely young. So they got, he's one of the teams that reference, they got to get old quick. They got to gain that experience pretty quickly. But Massey is a defensive back who will be there. He had 26 tackles a year ago. Leo Sim is a sophomore. Damian Zanu at linebacker. Bandy Diarra at defensive back. Jorge Lira, Gomez, who we referenced, Wareb, and Riley King at defensive line as well. So They're young, but there's a lot of names there to watch for United Township. Stock, what do you got?
UT last year was done in by their start. They went 1-5, but they won their last 3 games. In fact, the last 2 games that they played, they scored 105 points. In their last 3 field wins, because one of the wins was a forfeit, their last 3 wins they won on the field, they scored 42 points or more. They were done in last year a bit because I believe in the opener, Randall got banged up, Kelly got banged up. In fact, Peterson's first start was the week later against a Chicago public league school, I think Noble Muchen, and UT laid 60 on them. So, I mean,
yeah,
Peterson had a good, that was a good debut game for him. For UT this year, they open at LP. They have not beaten LP since 1985. And LP, according to the News Tribune, will be starting a true freshman in week 1. His name is Marion Persson, a 6'3", 190-pound freshman. He looks the part. I'm not sure if he will be if he's got the goods, but they believe he could be a decent quarterback. But for UT, that's a great thing to be playing a freshman quarterback. First night of his season, he's going to be starting. I'm sure Kelly and UT's defense will have some things cooked up for him to, welcome him to varsity football. For UT, last time they made the playoffs was 2001. Last time they won a playoff game was 1987. I know that Welch and the Panthers would love to erase those 2 marks from the books.
Well, we're kind of at that point with UT is when is the breakthrough going to come? I know when we did this podcast last year, we talked about that. Was the year going to be because of who they returned with Randall and Matthew Kelly and, the guys they returned last year, there were some expectations and some hype a little bit. And it's like, okay, Nick Welch has done such a good job of building this program to this point. When do they get that breakthrough that elevates them to that next level?
Yeah, Andy's a first-year dad. Had a dad. He's a dad for the first time.
Awesome.
So congratulations on that one. Looking at their schedule, if I know Stock, they haven't beat LP in forever, but if they can get that first win against LP, they play a Chicago Noble Muchen, number 2, week 2. Their last 2 games, I don't know much about the Wisconsin team, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, say they're going to win that game. Then they play Galesburg, who may be down. So there's 4 wins on their schedule right there looking at it. If they can get one of those other 5 games, they're a playoff team.
And last year they only lost to Sterling by 4 points at home. That was and I saw part of that game on NFHS Network. UT played very well in that game. One play here or there maybe turns that game around. Then they get Geneseo in week 4. I mean, it's not out of the realm that UT could be 3-1, maybe even 4-0. And we were talking about Rocky maybe getting off to a good start. There's nothing saying that UT and Nick Welch can't be 3-1 or 4-0 going towards October. I mean, there's a very good chance UT will be playing very important football in October.
I think the important thing to remember is when you start talking about where are the wins on this schedule is that they're going to be a young team and they're going to have to stay mature, stay composed. Nick Welch talked a lot about how important it is for them to, ride through the growing pains, stay composed and be confident, right? There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be some things that don't always go your way. How well can they battle through it? And I think we'll find out. I think there is an opportunity here, but they'll have to earn it, with some young players.
But because of that youth, if they go and beat LP that week 1 in that week 1 game, what a huge boost that would be.
Yep, absolutely. Yes. Yep. Because then I think it's the hardest win to get is that first one, to know you can do it. And so I think you're right. That would be a huge step. Same as we talked about last year, how important that week 1 game is. I think it is again this year as well. All right, one more team to cover here in the Western Big Six, the Sterling Golden Warriors. Head coach John Schlemmer led Sterling to a 5-6 season a year ago. They had a first-round playoff win, followed by a second-round loss to Wheaton St. Francis. One of the more interesting football seasons I think I can remember in this area, because we thought, what was it last year? They played Moline in the last week of the season, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they got the win to move to 4-5.
Correct.
Which
played 217.
Which then put them, because of the way the playoffs shook out, that made them a 4-win playoff team, which up until week 9, I think it was on some of the radar of the Sterling coaches, but not many people else. I mean, it wasn't on my radar. So, Cuff, talk about last year and kind of the unique scenario that was, and then we'll get into what this year looks like.
So getting that win, like you said, put them in the playoffs, and then they were the 16th seed going into the playoffs. So they had to go to Chicago that last year and play the number 1 seed, Chicago Peyton, who was 9-0.
Yeah.
And going into that game, I think maybe we're the only ones around here besides Sterling, but people down in this area realize that's a great opportunity for Sterling. Yep. They're going to go up there and play a team that probably didn't play nearly the schedule that Sterling played last year. And they hung 50 on Chicago Peyton, the number 1 seed in the playoffs. And I wasn't shocked. We sent a photographer up there. I said, you're going to shoot the first half and you're going to be done. They're going to blow this team out. And they did. And so there wasn't a shock there.
That's the 16 seed over the 1. And you were that confident. And we all kind of thought.
We just knew it. So, but they lose a lot from last year, especially up front with Lucas Austin. He went to Virginia. He's playing football there now. Good for him. And he was definitely the catalyst of that front line, the offensive line for them. They lost a running back. There was a quarterback. I mean, they got some guys back because they have a dual quarterback system, but they're going to be a young team. But the one thing you can't count out with Sterling is John Schlemmer is one heck of a coach. And I don't care what talent he has on that field. He's going to get them to play at full potential, and they're going to be a dangerous team. Maybe not in week 1. Give them week 3 when they hit the Western Big Six, and they're going to be a very dangerous team this year.
Sterling was the opposite of most teams in the Western Big Six last year. Last year, we've talked about Galesburg and UT and Rocky all having bad starts. Sterling went 1-2 in their last 3 games. I mean, if Moline would have beat them, Moline would have made the playoffs because they would have had that would have been their 5th win. Sterling also started 0-2 last year, which and they also went just 2-2 at home, and that's not Sterling like. Usually, that going into Roscoe Eads is never a pleasant trip. For Sterling this year, they open with Metamora, and according to the Peoria Journal-Star, one of the top running backs in the Peoria area, besides Oldham, who I've already referenced, is a man from Metamora. His name is Jadonian Crawford, I think. And they're really high on him as being one of the top running backs. So Wyatt Casons, who's a defensive end, and he also plays running back. Him and his colleagues on defense are going to have their work cut out with Mr. Crawford. One other thing, Sterling returns Cadian Phillips, and he's going to be sort of like their Swiss Army knife, if you will. He's going to be their speed guy, probably return kicks, probably on defense in the secondary. He's going to be one of their key players. And Drew Nettleton's the quarterback. Last year in conference, he threw for 524 yards. One thing that Sterling's got to do is they've got to be more ball security. They had a lot of interceptions last year in conference play. That's why they sort of struggled, because they weren't consistent with holding on to the football. You got to hold on to the football. They can control their turnovers, especially those interceptions. I think, and maybe ground out some wins. I think Sterling could be a team to be reckoned with. And like we said, they towards the end of the season, when John Schlemmer's teams usually are live wires, if you will, they go to Quincy, and they've never lost at Flynn Stadium.
Oh, well, let's go through.
Throwing it down, Chuck.
I know.
Hey,
I'm not throwing. I'm just.
No,
I'm
he's
just
right.
mentioning it.
Sterling's 4-1 against Quincy since joining the league.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some of the names we've already referenced. Drew Nettleton will be at quarterback, Caden Phillips, a slot receiver, Wyatt Casons at running back, AJ Coleman on the offensive line. You have Casons on defense. Caden Phillips is a center, or as a corner, I believe. Yep. Jimmy Wadsworth, a safety, and Will Ports, a linebacker. So Coach Schlemmer, what he likes about this team is he said they may be young, but they're fearless. They'll get after people. So, a bunch of guys with a high motor. You love that kind of team, right? Schuck, I mean, especially if it's a team that maybe they're playing some games as an underdog this year compared to where Sterling's been in years past. Man, if you got guys that are getting after it and they just got that high motor, there's a chance to win any football game.
And we saw a few of those guys last year, and they played with that high motor last year. They had some experienced guys around them. But if you get guys that are willing to go out there and lay it on the line, it makes everybody around you better, and those conversations have already happened. The practices I went to today, and guys that just want to get after it. And if you can inspire your guys, and Schlemmer does a great job, him and his entire staff, of building a team that wants to play with an edge. They want to play hard, and they want to put you in uncomfortable situations, which is why they've had success and why they've had success within the Big Six from day one.
When you got a coach that coaches with a high motor, I mean, that just fires everybody else up. The other thing I like about Sterling, Caden Phillips is probably a better basketball player than he is football player, but just an all-around athlete that you got to trust him in anything he does on the field, whether he's got the ball or not. Just trust him what he's going to do. He's got very good IQ playing sports anyway. It doesn't matter what the sport is. It's a very high IQ. But I like how they call each team individually. I think this is team 120.
I saw that.
Is what this is. So they play into that. Hey, you're team 120. What's your identity? You're not team 119. You're not this. You're team 120. What's your identity? And the kids really buy into that, which is really cool.
And I think if we made a list of, sorry, Stock, but if we made a list of the best athletes in the Big Six, I think Phillips would be on that.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
And you can't coach speed.
There you go. Getting back to Coach Schlemmer, his pregame speech to his players, he doesn't mess around, man. Those are some of the best in the business. I love it.
They are. Well, it's in your open, isn't it?
It is. You heard it at the beginning of the show. Yeah. I love it. All right, boys. That's the rundown of the Western Big Six this season. Before we get into prediction time, let's look at some games that stand out. We referenced a few along the way. Stock, I know you're excited about that Sterling Quincy game. You've called it out several times here. But what other games, Stock? What other games catch your eye here?
The game of the year is Quincy at Moline.
Yep. There you go.
Because
not burying the lead. Yep.
It's Moline is very good. Quincy's got to come to Moline. It's a long road trip. I just think if there's a game where Quincy isn't an overwhelming favor, I think Quincy's going to be favored in every conference game. If there's a game where they're not an overwhelming favorite, that's going to be the game. They'll still be favored to beat Moline. I think they'll beat Moline, but it's going to be close. And Browning Field, the history of Browning Field, that place has a special aura. Upsets occur. Weird things happen at Browning Field. If there's a game that Quincy loses, it would be at Browning Field against Moline.
That's kind of his Lee Corso moment there, getting all into it there.
If I had a mascot head, I'd be putting the Quincy mascot head on.
Well, you have to figure that whoever we pick as the favorite, there's going to be a game where you sit there and go, is that the game they stumble?
Right.
Yeah.
And I truly believe for Quincy, it's the Moline game. It's Moline's going to be back to being the Moline we expect. I don't foresee Moline missing the playoffs. I don't foresee Moline being a team that teeters on that 3 or 4 win plateau. And face it, Quincy's got to prove it can beat a big dog on the road. Over and over again. It's not they had a great year last year, but if you go back to those years with Jyrell Brock, they lost games on the road.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they did. They did. For me, there's 3 or 4 of them. Obviously, the Moline Rocky rivalry, one of the best in the state. Yep. That one, throw the records out, doesn't matter. It's going to be a fun game. It's at Rocky this year. I think Moline wants to get the win back over UT. That's a home game for them this year. Obviously, we talked about the Moline Quincy game. But then the other one, I think, is the Geneseo Sterling game.
Yep.
Sterling has beat Geneseo, I think, 11 straight times. It's something like that. It might be, I don't know. I don't remember the exact number. Stocking, I know you'll be able to find it and correct me. But last year, I thought that was going to be the year that Geneseo broke that string. And Sterling goes into Geneseo and puts 13-3 on them. It's been nine times.
Yep.
9 times. Okay. So I think that's one that, especially Coach Furlong, who is new to the system there, but is going to quickly get educated. Like, hey, this is the rivalry game we want to win. And it's up at Sterling this year. So I think that's going to be an interesting game. Not that it's going to decide the Western Big Six, but I think that's going to be a really interesting game this year.
Yeah, I think those are the games that stood out to me. You guys kind of nailed it. All right, it's prediction time. Well, Stock, you got something?
The game for second place in conference will be week 7, UT at Moline.
Oh,
That's
okay. Well, I may not agree with that. So let's get into it here. Let's go prediction time. Who wins the Western Big Six? Can we just get it out there?
Do we all have to say it at one time? Or?
I think basically, that's what I'm getting at. I think we all kind of know.
Quincy.
Yeah, absolutely, Quincy.
Twist my arm. I'll say Quincy.
Does Quincy run the table again? Are they 9-0?
Yes.
Yes.
I think so. Yes.
I would agree with that as well.
The week 1 and week 2, you start with the city rivalry against Quincy Notre Dame. Then you got Alton week 2, they win that. And then week 9 is against Capital City out of Jefferson City, Missouri. They're going to go there and win that.
Yep. Okay.
So it comes down to, is there anybody that takes them out in the Big Six? And I just don't see anybody slowing them down enough offensively to beat them.
Yep.
It would have to be Braden Little would have to have 4 or 5 interceptions.
Yeah.
He would have to have a terrible game. And I don't see that happening.
Or it would have to be a situation where, say, like a Moline, since I think they're going to be good, is where they just control and they go on 16, 17 play drives and then force a turnover and go on another 16, 17 play drive, and suddenly Quincy just runs out of time. It would have to be something like that.
Yep. All right. I think the real debate starts. Who ends up in second place in the Western Big Six? Stock,
Moline.
You seem to have some opinion here because what game did you say would determine second place?
UT at Moline. I think Moline is going to be second place.
So you think the UT has a chance to be in the mix then?
Yes.
Okay.
I think UT loses to. I think UT will lose to Quincy, and then that game against Moline will determine who will be in second place. Because I think UT gets Sterling this year, and I think they'll beat. I think they know they can't throw 2 pick sixes against Rocky because they were up 14-10 in that game when Rocky got those 2 pick sixes to win by 10. I think UT fixes that. I think they beat LP. I think they beat LP in the opener. Now that LP's starting a freshman quarterback, it will be his first ever game. I just think that UT will be a better team this year. I think Moline gets them at home. And I think Moline will finish second in the conference.
Okay, so you're saying Moline second, UT third,
Sterling fourth.
Okay, and he's giving us a 4th place. You're really going out there. All right.
Wow.
Who wants to speak up next?
I think I'll agree. I think Moline will be second.
Okay.
Just because of the players they have back.
Yep.
UT has a lot of places to replace people. Not that they can't do it, but just the uncertainty, the unknown of who's going to fill those big roles. Sterling, same thing. Who's going to fill those roles? I think the other team that could fight for second place at this point, if you're looking at rosters and where they're at, would be Rock Island.
Yeah.
I think Moline Rock Island game is going to be a big game.
Cuff, that's where I was going. I think by week 7, 8, or 9, I think we're talking about this Rock Island team as maybe the turnaround story, or the Fritz Deodone leading a squad to a playoff run. I really think they're going to end up in second place in the conference. I think Moline will be right there with them, which is why I really want to see that Moline Rock Island game. That's kind of where my head goes for second place. Shuck, what do you think?
I would agree with you. I think the Moline-Rocky game is what determines second place in the league. I'm not ready to give UT that breakthrough yet. You know, we talked about them last year, and it was like, okay, they got to prove they can get it done. And then they didn't. So it's like, until they prove me wrong, I'm going to hold back on them. I think they're close. I think UT's close to having that breakthrough, but I got to see it. I got to see it happen before I can sit there and say. And again, I go back to the days I was in high school and Moline and Rocky just rolling out athletes and running over Quincy left and right, and all the years I've covered it. You know, I just can't say, okay, yeah, Rocky's out of it. Yeah. Rocky's got too many athletes, too many kids. You know, and again, it's Moline Rocky. How cool would that if that game matters?
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I just think what pushes Rock Island over the edge for me is the wealth of experience, but also now the comfort in the system. They know the system. They're familiar with it. And a quarterback like Javian Clark-Pugh, who has now had the experience and he has the skills, you know, to, I think, really be a difference maker. So
I think the biggest thing we just learned there is that Brian Stocking loves the score, and it starts in a couple weeks, and we're the only half-hour show we're going to expand. I don't want to get too far into it. We're going to expand this year.
Ooh, love it.
Right.
Yeah, little teaser. Also, I think by us not picking Nick Welch, we just gave him bulletin board material. It's going up tomorrow, so.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. All right. That's a wrap on the Western Big Six. Thanks, boys. I appreciate the expertise as always, the knowledge that you bring. Even Dazzo, he's not here, but I'll even. We never got his prediction, so
we didn't. I think he was going to take Alleman anyway.
Okay.
He'll change it even he'll change it. Now he's got wiggle room to change
it after he makes yeah. All right, boys. Well, I appreciate it. We'll be in touch throughout the season. We'll get some instant reacts pods throughout the year. The fans need Brian Stocking on the pod. That's they're requesting it week in and week out. So,
well, one other thing, I saw Riverdale at the Tug. I saw Guy Derrick's. Riverdale's gonna make the playoffs.
Well, hey, there's a
5-4. They will pull an upset.
Okay,
they will make the playoffs.
Okay. Stock, I would love to have you on for a playoff preview talking Riverdale Rams. That would be amazing.
So would Guy Derrick's, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, exactly. We'd bring him on too.
How many note cards would Stock have if Riverdale Rams were in the playoffs?
Too many.
Well, Guy Derrick's was the coach at North and took North to their first ever playoff in 2015.
That state doesn't exist on this podcast.
Well, but his record does.
All right, boys, I appreciate it. This was the Western Big Six preview. Next week, we talk the Lincoln Land, so teams from the Lincoln Trail Conference and the Prairie Land Conference. Mitch will be back in for that one, back well-rested, rejuvenated from vacation, ready to jump right in. And then the following week, we'll be talking scrimmages and week one, and it's go time. So get out there, buy your shirts, get to the Breedlove's online store, buy your shirts. The shop closes at the end of the month, August 28th, but get them in, get the orders ready for the football season. I'm excited, boys. We're inching closer to Friday nights in the high school football season.
Can't wait. Let's go.
There we
That's
go.
Right. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks, boys. We'll talk soon. That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.